has soared past $36 trillion, the highest in history, double what it was just 10 years ago. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump is running for re-election with a massive spending bill, increasing defense budgets, cutting corporate taxes, and pushing for major infrastructure and industrial investments. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this bill alone could add another $8 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. But that's not all. The US continues spending tens of billions on global hotspots from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, while also committing to domestic investments to make America great again, with an elusive promise of 3% growth every year for the next decade. Think of America like a middle-class family that is used to spending beyond its means over several presidentships. They have relied on credit cards to live comfortably. Now Trump comes back saying, "Just spend more, I will invest and make." The money to pay it back. The issue is there is no proof these investments will actually pay off. Every promise of growth is clashing with reality, soaring interest rates, shaky market confidence, and companies pulling out what the media calls government spending to boost the economy is turning into a double-edged sword, driving borrowing costs up across the board. And what no one dares to say is if growth does not materialize soon, America could slowly slip into a default cycle, much like Greece did in 2010. During World War II, America carried more than 100% of its GDP in debt to fight the Nazis. But after victory, the economy boomed, and the debt was gradually reduced. During the 2008 financial crisis, debt also spiked, but was later controlled. Now in 2025. The US debt to GDP ratio has surpassed 100%. But there is no war, no reconstruction, and no clear plan for debt reduction. Experts predict that if all of Trump's promises are kept, this ratio could reach 143 to 161% by 2035. And without intervention, the Congressional Budget Office forecasts that US debt could hit 200 to 250% of GDP in the coming decades. That is the level Greece hit before spiraling into chaos, cutting pensions, closing hospitals, and losing an entire generation. The US spending policy in 2025 is not just unusual, it is dangerously extreme. Trump's beautiful bill, as he calls it, is designed to reshape the economy by cutting taxes, investing in industry, cutting regulations, and aiming for steady 3% growth over the next decade. But according to the Federal Budget Committee, if all the measures in this bill are enacted, the national debt will increase from $36 trillion to $50 trillion over the next 10 to 12 years. The danger lies in the fact that this plan relies entirely on the assumption that growth will just happen, but historical data says otherwise. According to the Congressional Budget Office and the Brookings Institution, there has never been a 10-year period in the 21st century where the US achieved 3% continuous growth. Even 2% growth is considered strong debt. So if the economy does not grow as expected, the US will not have any way to pay for this spending plan unless it raises taxes, cuts benefits, or borrows even more. But borrowing more brings an even bigger issue. Interest rates are rising too quickly. Right now, the US government is paying over $1 trillion every year just in interest on existing debt, according to JP Morgan. If bond interest rates rise by just 1 percentage point, borrowing costs will jump by another $300 billion per year. That is the entire budget of the US Department of Defense. And what is causing these rising rates? Declining market confidence. When investors start doubting the government's ability to repay, they demand higher interest rates. Last month, Moody's officially downgraded the US, stripping it of its final A rating, citing that the US has too much debt and is paying too much in interest. When companies leave the US, the first thing that disappears is jobs. But the real consequences go much deeper. Every electric car factory that leaves Michigan triggers a domino effect. Workers get laid off. Supplier contracts are lost, local restaurants see fewer customers, schools lose students, and town budgets shrink EIO. It is not just a loss of income, it is a loss of confidence, and it is happening in many places in Ingersoll, Ontario, where GM is shifting to large-scale EV production. The provincial government is offering tax incentives, and electricity is coming from stable, cheap hydropower. Meanwhile, in Ohio, Ford's assembly plants are starting to restructure a term everyone knows means reducing hours, cutting workers, and eventually closing down. There is no headquarters relocation announcement, no "we are leaving America" statement. But you see it in small print in financial reports. US operating costs up 12%, Canadian operating costs down 7%. You see it on the supply chain map. Lithium battery contracts are now signed with companies in Quebec, not Nevada. This exodus is silent, that it happens quietly, and because no one notices when a factory that was once running suddenly shuts down, no one is prepared for it. America's once thriving industrial heartland, the Midwest, is witnessing a slow hollowing out of its workforce, with skilled labor being left behind. And when the economy loses high-quality jobs, it does not create upward mobility, it just creates stagnation, leading to a quiet recession. If this trend continues, the US will not just face a debt crisis, it will also undergo a global role restructuring without a proactive plan by 2035. If spending policies do not result in the expected growth, US public debt could exceed 160 to 175% of GDP, according to several Congressional Budget Office models and international financial organizations. Oh, that is the danger zone. It is the point where the fiscal system becomes inflexible. It is the moment when even a small shock, a health crisis, a global financial collapse, or a military conflict could destroy trust. At that point, the government will not be able to issue new debt to save the economy, bond rates will soar, public services will be cut, and reconstruction will just be a slogan. And while America struggles to balance inflation and growth, Canada, offering cheap electricity, clear incentives, and a stable business environment, has quietly laid the foundation for a 21st century industrial chain. When the future is being built elsewhere, can America's past be enough to keep anyone here? $36 trillion in debt will not cause America to collapse overnight, but it will make the things that once seemed solid begin to shake. A factory halts hiring, a supply chain contract shifts to Canada. A generation of young engineers no longer wants to stay. No explosions, no shocks, just bricks being quietly pulled away, coldly and silently. Meanwhile, Washington continues to talk about reviving American manufacturing, still writing thousands of pages of bills, still promising that growth will come as if it is inevitable. But out there, markets do not live on promises. They live on real costs, on cheap electricity, on stable environments, and on interest rates they can afford. Ford does not need to announce it is leaving America. Tesla does not need to issue a statement about moving headquarters. Campbell Soup does not need to hold a press conference to say goodbye to the US. They just need a place cheaper, more reliable, and they have found it so in the end. What is being built on this mountain of debt while the financial markets are in panic? Dow Jones plummets by over 1,200 points. Stellantis lays off over 900 workers at 5 factories. Stocks fall into free fall. And what does Donald Trump do? He posts a strange tweet, then grabs his golf club and heads to the course. The US market just endured one of its worst days since the pandemic. Dow Jones dropped over 1,200 points. Nasdaq fell nearly 4.6% and S&P 500 plunged 3.5%. Stocks of major corporations like Apple, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, JP Morgan and Bank of America took a massive hit, with many dropping more than 10% in just a few hours. The primary cause, a surprise tariff policy announced by Trump called Liberation Day. This policy slapped Tariffs not only on China, Europe and Japan, but also on regions unrelated to trade like Diego Garcia, a US military base, or even a barren island in Antarctica, home to only penguins. While the market spiraled into panic, the president had no plan to stabilize it. Instead, he posted a tweet. "The surgery is complete. The patient is recovering and will be stronger than ever." Then he left the White House, headed to Mar-a-Lago, and went back to playing golf right after the tariff policy was announced. A wave of job cuts hit major U.S. corporations. Stellantis laid off over 900 workers across 5 factories, while Whirlpool slashed nearly 1/3 of its workforce in Iowa. The largest layoff of 2025, March 2025, saw 275,000 Americans lose their jobs, the highest since the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, surpassing even the 2008 financial crisis. This is no longer just a warning. It's a clear reality showing that the economy is suffering a massive shock from an ill-prepared policy major. Banks like Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, and Barclays have all downgraded their economic outlook, warning of a deep and widespread recession. The Federal Reserve no longer expects interest rate cuts in 2025 because the economy is too unstable for any adjustments. One of the most controversial aspects of Trump's policy is the method used to calculate tariffs. He determines the tariff rate by taking the trade deficit and dividing it by export value, a formula that has never been seen in any economics textbook. This raises serious questions about the fairness and long-term consequences of the policy. Former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin admitted that the 10% tariff is essentially a consumption tax, and it's the American people who will bear the brunt of it. Economists warned that this isn't just a financial burden, but could trigger a domino effect in the supply chain: higher goods prices, reduced consumption, and stalled production, all leading to a prolonged recession. Trump's media team repeatedly emphasizes trust. He's a master negotiator. But does that really hold up? Trump once ran a casino empire in Atlantic City, and every single one went bankrupt. Trump University was sued for fraud and had to pay millions in settlements. More recently, he was convicted both civilly and criminally for falsifying assets, causing severe consequences for the market. The question is, if his personal businesses have failed, why should we trust this management style to run the national economy while the market is in panic? The President of the United States meets with Laura Loomer, a figure known for her 9/11 conspiracy theories, rather than consulting economic experts or the Federal Reserve. Shortly after this meeting, 3 senior members of the National Security Council were fired. The question is, who is really influencing these critical decisions? If these changes stem from suggestions by someone outside the professional system, what are the risks to national policy? One financial expert put it bluntly: they're burning down the house just to cook a steak. This simple statement perfectly reflects the mindset of many Americans right now, as policies continue to create instability and the economy plunges into crisis. The big question is this lack of control or a deliberate strategy to rebuild in an entirely different way? In late 2024, Elon Musk stated, "Americans need to accept the pain if they want the country to be reborn." And Donald Trump said, "Collapse is necessary." Trump shouts, "I'm saving America with tariffs." But the stock market just silently free falls like an out-of-control airplane. And now you're the one who's paying the price. As soon as Donald Trump returns to Washington, the U.S. stock market doesn't even get a chance to relax. The S&P 500 drops more than 20% from its February peak, marking one of the sharpest declines in history, just minutes after rumors spread about a 90-day tariff pause. The market immediately goes green, but when Trump denies the rumor and calls it fake news, the market drops back down like a ship without brakes. This level of chaos is truly unprecedented. The indexes keep bouncing up and down, nothing like a stable market at all. Retirement accounts are vanishing quickly, while investors can only shake their heads at the unexplainable mess. Trump's tariff decisions have caused a massive disruption in the economy, leaving America's economic foundations serious. I don't know whether you know exactly who came up with the formula, but it allowed you to at least characterize most of these countries as being their terrorist well above the reality of the situation, so that when you put, say, that we're going to do half on them, it was much higher than anyone anticipated. And I think you'd have to concede that this was not the market reaction you were looking for. There's a way of maybe incrementally trying to accomplish some of the things that the president wants to do in a reasonable, serious way, and this just almost across the board. Music Trump didn't just push the US economy into a crisis, he also made American consumers pay the price directly. Tariffs don't just affect businesses. Every single American will now be paying more for imported goods. Prices are skyrocketing. Inflation is rising and workers are losing their jobs. Things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure. Like every department in our government, he's ruining. And he's right now destroying our economy. He's taking away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world with Zelensky. I love him. I wish he was our president. At that time I started crying because I knew it was something big. And I know that this is a historical moment today, that I do this for my grandchildren. The price the American people are paying for Trump's attempt to protect domestic industries is the collapse of the very economy. He promised to revive. Those promises seem to be getting buried under the wave of crises caused by the very tariffs he imposed us consumers are facing. Soaring living costs, and the struggle is only getting worse as tariffs spread. It's not just the stock market, but even everyday Americans are starting to get tired. Goods are more expensive. Consumers are boycotting American products, cancelling trips to the US, and even booing the US national anthem at sporting events. Trump's tariff policies have sparked extreme reactions from both sides of the border. And now Canada isn't sitting idly by. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced that Canada will impose a 25% tariff on all US cars that don't comply with trade agreements like USMCA. But unlike the US, Canada isn't acting recklessly. They have a clear strategy and are not playing around. In This Is What We Have, Canada strongly criticised the US's actions and issued a warning. We've been trying to warn the President of the United States about sugar-coat it. There may be some tough days ahead for Canadians, but I also want to reassure that we are prepared. We foresaw this, and boring on my experience helping to guide Canada through the 2008 financial crisis. Music Canada has sent a firm message that they won't tolerate unfair trade practices and will respond strongly to any unjust tariffs from the US. The price Trump is paying is the backlash from international partners and the loss of trust from the American people. Europe strikes back. What consequences will the US face? 25% tariffs on steel, cars and parts from Europe, and 20% tariffs on all imports are being considered by the US. Wall Street has been swinging 1,000 points a day due to this policy. Ursula von der Leyen warns all tools are on the table. What consequences will the US face when Europe retaliates? Trump creates a storm with super tariffs. Can you imagine what would happen if 25% tariffs were applied to items like steel, aluminum, cars and car parts from Europe? And it doesn't stop there. The US is planning to expand tariffs to semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, wood and most other goods. Within the next 24 hours, CNN has called this D-Day for a trade war that no one saw coming. Trump claims this policy will save the US economy. But will it? This policy could create significant change, but we need to examine whether it will deliver the results expected. Europe responds calm, but extremely firm. Europe doesn't want to engage in this confrontation. But when things go too far, Ursula von der Leyen emphasizes we don't want to retaliate. But if necessary, we have a strong plan, and we'll use it. In fact, the EU has already prepared tough countermeasures, including high tariffs on US goods like cars, soybeans, and even tech giants like Google and Apple. Europe is also actively seeking new trade markets, with ongoing negotiations with India, Indonesia and Thailand. They are not just looking to retaliate, but also to seize growth opportunities and reduce dependency on the US market. Wall Street's shaken US economy plummets. Financial experts, including Goldman Sachs, have warned that a 20% tariff on all imports could lead to a serious recession. The Wall Street stock market has experienced extreme fluctuations, swinging 1,000 points every day. Due to this policy shock, economist Mark Zandandi from Moody's Analytics also warned